Welcome, everybody. We're celebrating the World Sanskrit Day celebration at Ananda Ashram. And this weekend, we're moving along with Naren Budhakar, who is a dear friend and the head of the music department here at Ananda Ashram, and a fabulous speaker as well. And today he's going to present Aspiring to a Romance with the Celestial in a Relationship with Sanskrit. And this year's theme is For the Love of Sanskrit. So nothing could be better. Presenting our friend.
Thank you, Shantananda. I want to start by first thanking both Shantananda and Indiraji for organizing this workshop yet another year to serve the grand, beautiful cause of creating the love for this divine language in the masses. I would like to thank Bharatiji. She's not here, but she has been the shining beacon of Sanskrit's existence, survival, proliferation, everything at the ashram. I would like to thank all the staff from kitchen to housekeeping for working behind the scenes to make everything in an orderly manner. Special thanks to Seth Lax for tirelessly being here and taking all the verbal abuse of the presenters and taking it with good sport and finding solutions at the last minute. And all of you, by being here, not just the participants, but everybody in the audience, being here is a statement that you value what is most valuable. So every effort in this direction is extremely encouraging. Deven was wonderful. I did squeeze in about 10 minutes of listening, and the rest I will do later. But it was beautiful. It's not easy to follow up your act, but I'll try. Anne Vial needs a special mention from my side. Her presentation was quite nuanced and substantial. And the message in this is, if you are an earnest student of anything, and if you put your heart in it, then you don't need to be disciplined to do anything. What comes out of it is guaranteed to be profound. And that's what I saw in her presentation yesterday. And from a purely global point of view, for me and for my family in India, and from my grandfather who is not with us anymore, but he was a Sanskrit scholar, it is extremely heartening to know that in different countries in the world, people are keeping this flame not just alit, but actually fanning it and making gigantic. So it may be a small step or baby step for you, as you described yesterday, but as Neil Armstrong said, it's a giant step for the mankind. Before I begin the actual content, and I'll be looking at the clock to make sure I don't spill over, there are a couple of disclaimers. Number one, I won't go into the etymology too much. Most people have discussed that. And the point I'm going to make is the capability, the syntactical capability and the semantical capability of the language. And so that is more important point. Actually going down to each verb root and etymology, people have covered it enough, so I will do it a little bit, but not all the time. And number two, the English phonetic rewrite of some of the Sanskrit verses, never mind the fact that the incompatibility between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs was causing a problem. The real problem is I have never learned Sanskrit in English, and so those conventions of doing this and that and putting a bar here or there, I simply did not bother with it. You'll just have to go with me when I read it. And the third thing is this. And there is an old verse, it actually comes from Mahabharata. It comes actually from the Ramayana. When Ram was the king, here is the verse. न राज्यम न च राजा सित न दंड्यो न च दंडिकः धर्मेणैव प्रजा सर्वा रक्षन्ति स्म परस्परम. The description of Rama's empire was that there was no constitution, there was no king, there was no punishment, there was no punisher. By the automatic righteousness, the wars took care of themselves. We are trying to, as a management, get the ashram to that place. Until then, the danda is necessary. But jokes aside, I'm just going to use it as a pointer. So that's the only reason I'm using it. And now let's get into the actual talk. Can we go to the first slide? Or the second one? I'm going to introduce what I find is the most nuanced grammatical structure and syntax of Sanskrit language in a very superficial way because the subject is endless. The grammar is extremely precise. Panini's work is exemplary. It has been called as the most almost mathematically precise formulation to turn a natural language, to strip off a natural language of all the contextual semantics and make it as objective as possible. So the grammar is extremely precise, it's extremely unforgiving. However, learning it allows you to be in control of precision to no end. And then the syntax, which is what I want to talk about a little more right now. Let's start with the formation of the language. Let's see how the language comes into existence. Language requires words, and words require vocalization. So when the complexity, that degree of complexity of vocalization comes into play, the next question is, what vocal sounds are at our disposal? What vocal sounds are at our disposal so that we can even begin using them? We cannot have the same language that the animals have because their vocal cords are different. So speaking about our species, what are the sounds that we can even possibly use to, to form words? That absolutely is tied with human anatomy, and actually as far as Sanskrit is concerned, human conscience as well, but we'll get there. As far as the anatomy is concerned, from the vocal cords, which are the instrument to produce the sound, and you know all these things, that's why I'm just going to describe it in one line. The organization and the logics that go into the sounds, both the consonants and the vowels that Sanskrit uses, is as precise and expansive in its palette as the human species can get. So you have the gutturals, the palatals, the cerebrals, the dentals, labials. I don't want to go into it because you know all this. But starting from the very back of the throat to the very front, teeth and lips, all the possible ways of creating sounds have been used. So though 4 or 5 places of the anatomical locations, and then of course the next level of complexity is with how much accent, with how much air, how much aspiration. And that gives you one more layer of possibilities of the tonal palette. The third complexity is the laghus and the gurus. You have a certain word produced from a certain place in the mouth. You are giving it with a certain accent, certain aspiration, but how long should it last? That's the concept of laghu and guru. And as we all know, converting laghus into gurus or vice versa, at the best, can be irritating. At the worst, it can have horrific meanings, sometimes opposite to what the verse is trying to say. And when this language that takes pride in its precision and giving the status of mantra to each syllable, you can understand why insistence upon the right pronunciations is not some hierarchical snobbery. It is the soul of the language, and if you want the reap benefits of it, that is something you need to pay attention to. So you can find that Sanskrit is extremely logical in this. You know the distribution, 13 vowels and 25 consonants. There are 4 light ones, the yara, lower. I don't want to go into it. 3 sibilants, the ushmans, sir, sure, sure, almost produce heat. And the her is a pure aspirate. What is important is these ushmans and the aspirates, they are even factored in as the distinct pronunciations. And again, without judging or calling anything superior or inferior, it is noteworthy that other languages do not have those nuances. For example, I can't do it. Is it aspirated or not? Is it I can do it or I can't do it? Can I do it? Sometimes it is indistinguishable for people who are speaking it. However, one is with aspiration, one is without. And the fact that it is indistinguishable speaks something about the lack of, if I may say so, sophistication or nuance, or maybe let's not say lack of it. The language of Sanskrit that makes that distinction has a little more nuance, at least that I can say safely. This is just one example. The other thing is the unique pronunciations of the words with their long or short A's and E's and all the vowels. The pronunciations are unique. When you spell something, the vowels in it can assume different meanings, and therefore you have to change the spelling. For example, my last name is Budhakar, but if I put that up, people almost call me Budhakar. It's not the title I am quite ready to assume yet. So it's not Ananda Ashram, it's Ananda Ashram. It's not Ramyana, it's Ramayana. It's not Mahabharata, it's Mahabharata. And it's not Shanti Sadhanam, it's Shanti Sadanam. The mistake is not the ones with the pronunciations, the mistake is in the lack of precision of the language, if I may say so. This creature I have written here because it is one of the consonants, but it is rarely, if at all, mentioned in the Sanskrit alphabets. Its pronunciation is ळ, the retroflex. In Marathi, my mother tongue, it's used prolifically, but Marathi is, of course, the derivative of Sanskrit. In Marathi, we have a lot of ळ. In Sanskrit, the only example that I know, and at least the scholars say that's the only known example, is Agni Mile Purohitam, the starting of the Rigveda. I don't know any other example. If you do, please share it. We can move on. Yeah. All right. This matter ties up the Sandhi and Samasa again with the capabilities of Sanskrit language. I will not even talk about Sandhi because it has been discussed before. Let's move on to Samasa, and Anne mentioned it yesterday, so I thought I'd make a passing mention of it. Samasa literally means a compound. Let's imagine you have 2 words. Words is not the exact terminology for it, but I don't know what it is called. It's the Purva Pada and the Uttara Pada, but whatever it is, let's say you have 2 words. Let's say one is a descriptor of the other. Now, whether the former word is more important or the latter word is more important, or whether both are more important, equally important, these are all the possibilities in the Purva Pada and Uttara Pada. But now imagine a situation where a language allows you to bring 2 words together. You don't have to say this and this, or this or this. All those conjunctions are made redundant. You just bring the 2 words together, and with the rules and semantics, it is understood what they mean. How much economical and poetic that would be. So Sanskrit allows that. Rama Krishna, Rama and Krishna. If you wanted to say it in English, you would have to say Rama and Krishna. But Sanskrit language allows you to say Rama Krishna. Hasta Padav, hand and feet. So there are various examples of these compound words, uh, and one of them, there are various types of these compound words, and one of them is the most interesting one, bahuvrihi. It's a type of a samas, and I will just discuss that because it's really very interesting. In this particular type of compound word, again there are two words that are brought together, but what they're addressing to, those two words together, is the third entity, it's something else that is not even explicitly mentioned in those two words. One may be a qualifier of the other, but the other is a qualifier of something else. So when those two words are put together, when bahuvrihi samas is brought forth, those two words are actually talking about something entirely different. It is only mentioned as an implicit matter. One good example in the month of Shravana, which is, the Janmashtami is coming, Lord Krishna's birthday, Chakrapani, that's a good example of a bahuvrihi samas. Chakra means like a circular protective weapon, and Pani means hand. So if you put the two words Chakrapani, it means a circular weapon in a hand. But in this case, the bahuvrihi samas, by semantics, tells you that when it is the word Chakrapani, what you are supposed to interpret it is one who wields a chakra in his hand. And therefore, although there is no mention of Lord Krishna, Chakrapani is actually indicating Krishna. This indirectness, hinting, semantics, allows the language to have so many poetic shades of meaning. And just so you know, the interpretation, especially whether something is Tatpurush or Bahuvrihi, is by no means a given matter. This is where it requires semantics. And Sanskrit allows meanings to come out of this. And because this one particular verse is interesting, that was an example of Bahuvrihi and Tatpurush, I decided to use it. Okay, some of it is being cut off. I don't care. It's okay, so don't worry. Okay, that's okay. So we'll just, if you want to chant it together, I'm not going to do it for many verses, but let's just do this one if you don't mind. Aham cha tvam cha Rajendra Lokanatha Ubhavapi Bahuvrihiraham Rajan Shashti Tat Purusho Bhavan. And here is the story. A beggar went to a king and he said, Aham cha tvam cha Rajendra, hey great Lord, you and I, Lokanatha Ubhavapi, we are both Lokanatha. Lokanatha, Loka means the world and Nath means the master. The question is, how do you interpret it? And he says, we are both world master. However, Bahuvrihi Raham Rajan, I am Bahuvrihi, means its interpretation is Lokanatha, world master. I am the one whose the entire world is master. In other words, I am the servant of the whole world. And that's the Bahuvrihi samas. But Shashti Tatpurusho Bhavan, you are the Shashti Tatpurush. It has to be interpreted differently. In your case, it is Lokasyanatha, the master of the world. And this kind of beautiful nuance and poetry is allowed by the samas. So this is one example of how the interpretations can proliferate out of this very concept of samas. That's what makes the language rich. Next one, please. Okay. And now I'm going to delve into a little more of the poetic nuances of this language. One form of poetry is riddles. Often in the courts of the kings or in the assembly of wise people, someone would recite something that frankly sounds ridiculous, but it's actually a riddle, and when it is presented to someone, It's supposed to give the solution of the riddle in a poetic form. It's supposed to complete the verse in a poetic form that actually gives the answer to this riddle. So here is the one. Mrugat Siha Palayate. Mrugat means from the deer. Siha, the lion, Palayate, runs away. This is what is presented. Lion runs away from the deer. It's frankly ridiculous, but it's a riddle. How do you answer this? And next slide. Here is how it was completed on the spot. First line, Kasturi Jayate Kasmat. Kasturi is the musk. From what is musk produced? The deer. There is a musk deer. So the answer is Mrugat. Next question, next line, Ko Hanti Karinam Kulam. Who is capable of taking on the pride of elephants? A lion. And the third verse, Kim Kuryat Katoru Yuddhe. What does a coward do on a battlefield? He runs away. And therefore, the answer is, next slide, Kasturi Jayate Kasmat. From whom does the musk come? Ko Hanti Karinam Kulam. Who takes on the pride of elephants? Kim Kuryat Kataru Yuddhe. What does the coward do in a war? And the answer is Mrugat, from the deer. Siha, the lion, runs away. So there are many examples of Samasya Purtis, and lot of these things happen on the fly. Angulya Kavate Praharati Kutilo, it's a double antandar, but we have only so much time. So this is one example of the Samasya Purti, the riddle and their solution on the fly in assembly of wise ones. Next slide, please. Okay. We'll discuss this. We don't have to recite it. We don't have much time. And maybe this is one I will explain with some etymology, but not too much. Tam bhusutam mukti mudar hasam. Bhusutam, the daughter of the earth, that was Sita. Sita was found while plowing the field. Janaka Raja found her, and she was married to Ram. So Bhusuta, the daughter of the earth, that was Sita. Tam Bhusuta Muktim, one who offered salvation to her, that is Lord Ram. Udara Hasam, it's a Sandhi. Udara Hasam, one whose laughter is all pervasive. One day, I bow down to Yato, Bhavya Bhavam, whose incarnation is grand. Daya Shrihi, who is endowed with prosperity and compassion, Daya. So this is the admiration of Lord Ram, one who offered the salvation to Sita. I bow down to him. His laughter is grand, his incarnation is grand, and he is very compassionate. And this entire thing is a palindrome. We know what that means, palindrome, forward and backward. There is one example in English, Abel was a hare, I saw Alba. It's hard to come up with more palindromes in English, and this has something to do with the rigidity versus the flexibility of the language. There's no two ways about it. So, read it backwards. Sangharada mukti muta subhutam. Okay. Shri Yadavam Bhavya Bhatoye Devam. So Shri Yadavam Bhavya Bhatoye Devam Sanharada Mukti Musa Subhutam. The entire thing is a palindrome. Yeah, well, I read the second line first because it was easier to do it like that. But you see the point, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah? The entire thing is a palindrome. Look at the second line here. Samharada, that's what this is. Mukti muta subhutam, this is what it is. You can read the rest. The entire thing is a palindrome. And let's look at the meaning of the second one. No. Shri Yadavam, Yadukulotpanna, the one who was born into the kula of Yadavas, that's Lord Krishna. Bhavya Bhatoya, this etymology is worth going into. Bhavya Bha, Bhavya Uttama Bha Yasya Sa, one whose glory is grand, one whose radiance is grand. That's basically the connotation to sun, S-U-N. And Toya, Toya means water, but in this context, and again this is what the language allows you to do, moon is associated with water in its fluidity, its gentleness. In fact, moon was one of the 14 precious things that came out of the churning of the grand ocean. So moon is closely associated with water. So in this case, Bhavya Bhatoya means the sun and the moon, and Devam, he is the Lord of the sun and the moon. Krishna is the Lord of the glory of sun and the moon. Yada aditya gatam tejo jagat bhasayate khilam yat chandramasi yat chagano tat tejo vidyamamakam. Chapter 15. The glory of the sun and the moon comes from me. That is the proclamation of Lord. So this is again more description of Krishna. And Sanharada Mukti Mutasu Bhutam. Sanharada, Sanhar is destruction. Da means the giver. Da is feminine. That female, that was the imparter of destruction. In Krishna's life, that person was Putana. I don't want to go into that story, but when Krishna was baby, Putana was a demoness. Tried to kill him, and she ended up losing her life in the process. But the glory of Lord is such that if you die at his hands, that's the matter of salvation. So even in terminating you, he is doing the greatest blessings. So Sanharada Muktim, he is imparting the liberation to one who came to destroy him. Uta, Asu Bhutam. One meaning of the word Asu is breath, vitality. And Bhutam is the universe. One is the breath, one who is the breath or the life of all universe. So it is beautiful to see that the two great lords of Indian mythology, the Rama and the Krishna, have been described in two lines, and they are palindromes of each other. Just look at the beauty of it. Because Ram was austere, Krishna was all-pervading. Ram was very straight line, Krishna had all this. They absolutely complemented each other like the Raga Bhairava and Yamana. One is austere with Tandava and Lasya, and Yaman is romantic. One is in the morning, one is in the evening. A great master of Indian classical music sang only those two rags during his entire life. And he was one of the greatest masters. And when he was asked why he sang two rags, he said, unfortunately, there is a morning and evening, or I will stick to only one. So you don't win by the numbers, you win by the quality. So that is something else that Sanskrit allows you to do. What was I going to say? Never mind. Next. Yeah, this, okay, this comes from a text called Paduka Sahasram. Paduka means, okay, so the feet of the Lord, and then he will wear certain auspicious sandals. Those are called Paduka. It's important to explain that Padukas, the sandals that the Lord wears, is a very seriously auspicious matter in the Indian mythology for the following reason. Yogis and great saints have said time and again that they aspire to have a glimpse of just the feet of the Lord. They won't rush into saying that we got enlightened today, or our Kundalini arose today, or I'm going to get my Kundalini aroused somewhere. They don't make those outlandish claims. They are so humble that they say we spend lifetimes getting a glimpse, trying to get a glimpse of his lotus feet. And even that can be a little audacious, and therefore even the sandals that the Lord wears are considered the Lord's own blessing. When Ram went into exile, Bharata, his younger brother, tried to persuade him to come back, and when Ram said, I am duty bound, then Bharata said, there is no way I am going to rule the kingdom knowing that you are in exile. I want your paduka, I want your sandals, that I will do the coronation of, and I will run the kingdom in the name of your padukas. So paduka is a big deal. Now the story with this is the Tamil saint Deshika was challenged to come up with a stotram that described the glory of padukas, and he came up with what is called as Paduka Sahastram. He came up with 1,000 verses just admiring the glory of paduka, the sandals that the Lord wears. It's a very big matter. Even in Marathi, the great singer Bhimsen Joshi has sung a song, Ata Kothe Dhave Mana Tuje Charan Dekele Aza. My mind will wander no more now that I have glimpsed your feet. It just occurred to me. So this is one of the verses from the Paduka Sahastram. Again, there is no point in going into the etymology. It will take too much time. That's almost not the point, which you'll understand soon. Sthiragasam, those who are the sinners, Sadaradhya, worshipped by those who were sinners and now they knew what the right thing to do was. Vyataka Tatamata, the remover of people's sorrows. Sat Paduke, that auspicious sandals. Sarasa, Sarasa literally means making a pleasant sound. And you make a pleasant sound, you sing when you are very happy. So indirectly, what the poet is appealing to the Paduka, the sandals, is let my auspices be so acceptable to you that you will lead me to the Rangaraja Padanne. Rangaraja is Lord Krishna. To his lotus feet, you lead me. But he is using padukas, he is asking padukas to actually take him to the feet. But you will do it while humming music to yourself. You will be so pleased in doing it. Let my devotion to you make you sing while you are taking me to salvation. That is what it means. And then here is the point of this. Can we go to the next slide? This is a chessboard, and that piece is the knight. Knight is a very unique piece because it moves in the L shape. If everybody knows chess, I don't have to talk about this. Yes or no? Okay, all right. Okay, I'll be very quick. Knight moves in an L shape. This is an L, this is an L. These are all the places where a knight can go, right? This is an L. It can be vertical in both directions, or angular, or like this. Is it clear? Of course, it is an 8 by 8 grid, so when knight is on the periphery, it has less places to go to. And therefore, one of the wisdoms in chess, and I will just say it once and we'll move on, is knight on the rim is dim. You don't have to put your knight in the rim. It's ineffective. The more central it is, the more squares it covers. Now, I'll tell you where I'm going with this. How can you, or is it even possible, to make a knight go to all the squares of the chessboard without ever landing on the same square twice? This problem, in general, comes under the category of Hamiltonian path. Now I'm talking mathematics. If there are a number of foci, focal points, that need to be traversed, that need to be paid visit to, and then there are various rules. You can go only in diagonal, or you can go to any point only once, or you can go in circles. You can make up all the rules. So the general category of this is the Hamiltonian path problem. It has a lot of practical uses, although the mathematics doesn't care for such mundane as practical use. That's for the selfish human beings. Mathematics is art for the sake of art. However, the practical use is, if a seller or a vendor wants to go to 20 places, what is the best way in which he can optimize? So it has some practical uses. But so the question was, can this be done? And if yes, how so? And I think it was the French mathematician, or Austrian, I keep forgetting, Euler. He solved this problem in 17th century. And basically what he said was, First, you have to figure out, if possible, how to make the knight do it in 32 squares, half of the chessboard. And as long as, having done it in 32 squares, the knight lands somewhere on the edge, then in one step, he will go to the next place in the next half, and you just do the mirror image of whatever you did in the, do you know what I'm saying? So he solved the problem for 32 squares, and he made the knight land on the 33rd square, that was the first of the next half, and then the whole process repeated. That was no problem. And now, let's see where we are going with this. Can we go to the next slide? Because I did it by hand, I know it's not a perfect square, and because of the incompatibility, this text is cut off, but don't worry about that. Okay, it's okay. We'll do it next time. These are 64 squares, and I have just written the entire verse here. This is the first square, and here is where the knight goes. This is the second square. This is the L shape, number 2. So sthita. Then number 3, sa. Number 4, ma. I don't want to go through the entire thing, but you can take my word that it forms a sentence. And let's go to the next slide. This is the sentence. Duram hasam sannatada sadhya tapakarasara. Sthita samaya rajatpa pagatara madake gavi durahansan sannatada sadhya tapakarasara. This line comes out of that in the moves of the chess. And can you go back 2 slides? I'm sorry. One more. Yeah. Okay. So next one. Go to the next one. Yeah. And next one. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So and go to the next one. This is what comes out of it. What this means is, again, without going into the too many details of etymology, sthita, ones who are reposed, samaya rajat, those who shine timely with their righteous deeds, it protects them. Madake means those who are intoxicated in your praise. Gavi is being at the center of like a radiant disk, like sun. So those padukas are actually sitting at the most radiant spot, like the center of the sun. And Durahasan Sannatada Sadhya Tapakarasara. Durahasan, the crest fallen. Sannatada, removing their sorrows, giving them the blessings. Sadhya Tapakarasara. Atapaka. Atapaka means warding off your whatever is hurting you. And Asara, again it's part of the Sandhi. Asara means those who go everywhere. It is worth mentioning this particular word because padukas, the sandals, are supposed to be stationary. But he's calling them the ones that travel in all universe. It's a metaphorical thing. The spirit behind the padukas is traversing everywhere. If you put them on the throne, the Lord will rule the kingdom via their medium. Now what is interesting is this was solved by Deshika in 10th century. Euler did it in 17th century. So several hundred years before that, this problem was actually solved, and it's no coincidence that it follows the trajectory of the knight. It reads one way when you read the squares in a chronological order, and when you follow the path of the knight, it comes out to be another line. And it has been noted that doing this is in fact even more difficult than the problem of the knight. Because in case of solution to the 32 squares, all you have to do is find the path and then you're done. But here, not only do you have to find the path, you have to put the right letters in each of them so that they will form meaningful sentences, both read chronologically and in the knight's path. So I think it is just brilliant. Again, the language allows that. Uh, okay, all right. Okay, next. I think I won't need more than 10-15 minutes. I rushed through a lot of matter, and it's okay. People can use some break. So this comes back to aspiring to romance with the celestial. And maybe because I have more time than I thought, I'll just recite a verse. It was said that in the kingdom of Bhoja, the great king Bhoja, and the great Kavi Kalidasa was a Pandit in the kingdom of Bhoja Raja. We all know Kalidasa. And it was said that Bhoj was himself a great poet, and in his kingdom, poetry was particularly at its pinnacle. It was said that everybody had some poetic talent. Last time, I think I recited a story of somebody who wanted to challenge Kalidasa, and so he stayed overnight in Kalidasa's village. And the next day, he asked his palanquin bearers to take him to Kalidasa, and then he asked them a question in Sanskrit, and they answered back with such nuance. And then he asked them, how do you know so much poetry? And they said, we don't know anything, we just bear Kalidasa from one place to another, and whatever fell on our ears. So it was quite a humbling experience for the poet, and if the palanquin bearers of Kalidasa are that nuanced, what chance do I have to challenge him? So I think I told that story. There is a similar story that I will narrate, and then I will conclude with talking about this. Apparently, one Pandita who heard that in Bhoja's kingdom, everybody was a capable poet, and the king himself was a good poet actually. And the king took pride in the fact that poetry was so prolific. So one time this Pandit from another village got hold of a weaver, somebody who weaves clothes. And he took him to the assembly where the king was sitting in his palace. And he says, hey King Bhoj, you are so proud that your troops are There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And he said to the king, everybody is so savvy at poetry. This is an ordinary weaver. Do you think he has any poetic talent? And the king said, let's ask him. And I hope I remember this because I didn't plan to include this in the talk. Said something like, the weaver said, when the king asked him, can you show your poetic talent? And the weaver said, Kavyam karomi, nahi charutaram karomi. I do poetry, but not very well. Yatnyat karomi yadi charutaram karomi. If I try harder and study harder, maybe I will be even better at poetry. Bhupala Mauli Mani Mandita Pada Padme, O king, at whose feet all the jewels of the world. He Bhojaraja, and this is the punchline, he's addressing to the king. He Bhojaraja, Kavayami Vayami Yami. He says, Kavayami, I do a little bit of poetry, Vayami, but actually I weave, and Yami, and now I have to leave. Because in the parenthesis, I need work to do. So this whole He Bhojaraja, Kavayami Vayami Yami was a nuance that again Sanskrit allows, and that was the glory of Bhoja's kingdom, where a weaver was capable of coming up with something like this. The arts and sciences and humanities blended freely into each other. So for all the reasons that we discussed just now, for me personally it has been a love affair with the language. The language is glorious, it's unattainable because it's infinite. It seems so radiant and divine, it almost seems otherworldly, like a constellation in the sky that you can admire but cannot help falling in love with, knowing that you cannot attain it. But that doesn't matter. And yet, as austere and disciplinary as the language is, and as unforgivingly chastising it is for the slightest error that you can make, and even great scholars haven't been exempt from this, despite all this, to me, and I'm sure to all of you, its final message is that of glorious beauty and love. No matter how much the chastisement, you read Bana Bhatta's Kadambari, and as long as the texts like Meghadutam of Kalidasa exist, you cannot help but to have your heart fill with quite visceral romanticism of the highest order. Even the chastisement becomes Madhura Bhakti of all the forms of worship. The Madhura Bhakti, the worship through love, is considered highest, because when you love the object, you don't need to be reminded again to do the penance. You don't need to be reminded to do your meditation auspices. When you love something, everything comes automatically. And in love, the formalities are dropped. The gopis never had any formalities with Krishna. Sometimes they were frankly audacious. They were presumptuous. They took him for granted. They claimed him for their own. But all these boundaries and norms are ignored when the love is true. That is something that I definitely experience with this language, because every time you read a beautiful text, the floodgates open and you just feel drowning in the ocean of something that is so pretty that you don't want to leave it. The syntax and semantics, again we talked a little bit of that. Syntax actually means the use of the words in a sentence so that it's logically valid. Mrugat Siha Palayate, the lion runs away from the deer, is syntactically accurate because the sentence is grammatically correct. There's nothing wrong with it. But semantically it's inaccurate because you don't experience that. Here is one example. So the precision of Sanskrit is such that the ambiguities of semantics that exist in many other languages are absolutely eliminated from Sanskrit. This is not to be confused with the samas, where Sanskrit allows you multiple meanings. It's not to be confused with that. But in the context, it's very precise. And here is one example that I have written here. Laghu balakaha dandena raktam kandukam prahritavan. A small child with a bat hits the red ball. Now if you alter the order of this in English, a small bat hits the red child with a ball or whatever, you can make the permutation combinations. All those sentences are possible in English. The same sentence if you change the order. And then you can understand why there are dangling participles, and if the sentence gets broken at the wrong time, it gives absolutely horrific meanings. In Sanskrit, and I will just use this one example, Laghu Balaka is the first person. There is no question who the subject of is. The subject of this sentence is. Dandena is the Tritiya Vibhakti, what is it called? Instrumental. So the Dandena is the instrumental. No matter where you use that word in the sentence, it is being an instrument, never the subject. Raktam Kandukam, that's the object. So whatever the Raktam and Kandukam is, that is the object to which something is happening. You can never mistake it for a subject. So even if you change the word order, the meaning is unchanged, and this is the precision that leads to the following thing which I'm going to read. One of the last things I'm going to say. Richard Briggs, scientist for NASA, and here is what he wrote. He wrote an entire abstract, and I have written it down to not misspeak it. Here is what Rick Briggs wrote, scientist for NASA. Thank you. Here is what he writes, and there is actually an abstract in which it is written. You can find it online. Much time, effort, and money has been spent in designing an unambiguous representation of natural language to make them accessible to computer programming, especially artificial intelligence. The effort has been centered around creating a scheme designed to parallel the logical relationship to that syntax of a natural language. And because of the extreme imprecise and confusing syntax and semantics of the natural language, it is a general knowledge that this effort is frankly useless. However, here is what he goes to say. There is at least one language with a long philosophical and grammatical tradition that has continued to exist with undiminished vigor to date, that has the capabilities of the precision and the logical correlation to mathematical symbols without any drawbacks and ambiguity of a natural language otherwise. And he said categorically that language is Sanskrit. And as we speak, there is somebody, his name is something Rao, Akhilesh Rao or somebody. He actually has a project AI where he's trying to write some of the languages of artificial intelligence in Sanskrit. And of course, when some norms are established, it's not easy to radically change them. English language has already been established, or other languages have been established, but the efforts have been going on. But it is noteworthy that Sanskrit offers that potential, and great scientists recognize this possibility. So, my reflection on this was, we don't celebrate languages. We may get argumentative, we may get involved in our Scrabble or crossword, but beyond that, we don't really celebrate language. And Sanskrit, with its prolific poetry and precision and the grammatical accuracy that it actually allows you to celebrate it. Looking at this glorious poetry, if you read the Meghadutam of Kalidas, it takes you on such a visual journey. The words cease to exist. He literally paints a picture. Feel like you are traversing with that cloud and seeing all these glorious splendors that are happening all around him from an aerial point of view. When you read something like this, not only are you imbibing a text, but you are celebrating the joy that the language offers, in the process falling in love with it. Om Shanti. Thank you.